Okay then. Hello everyone. Welcome to the 411 Ground and Pound MMA podcast. We are, of course, your weekly look into the wide, wacky, wonderful world of mixed martial arts. My name is Robert Winfrey, and I am your host. Now, thank you very much for tuning in, especially as the year is winding down, and all that entails. So, thank you very much. What do we got? We got a quick review of UFC on ESPN Plus 123, almost the last UFC on ESPN Plus card. We can almost be done with ESPN Plus. Oof. Man, what a rough service that is. I've said before, I have not had nearly the same technical problems other people have had with it, but even aside from some of the technical issues, most of which seem like they're something about the UFC broadcast married with it, because a lot of other stuff on ESPN Plus does not have those problems. But I mean, the search functionality, some of the interface, ugh. So we'll see what it looks like with the UFC over there on Paramount Plus next year. That'll be something. So we have a review of that event. No event to preview because this Saturday is a little bit close to Thanksgiving. Not stopping WWE from running Survivor Series, but they were kind enough to tape SmackDown last week, so no one has to go like straight from Thanksgiving to a crappy SmackDown. And yeah, I've seen the spoilers. It's not looking. This last one was actually pretty solid. Next one, ooey. Just gonna leave it at an ooey. We'll see what happens. Anyway, we also have news of the week. A little bit of news. Nothing super major, but a few things that I think are probably worth talking about. So that's what we got on the agenda. So, as always, anything you can do to interact with the product is appreciated. Like, comment, subscribe, star rating, written review. Y'all know the drill for all of that. So, mostly just thanks for listening. That is the most important thing. If all I wanted was views, I could whip up a listen bot and artificially crank my numbers. But, I'm not selling my integrity for that. So, there we are. It's not a shot at anyone in particular, just a generalized practice I find objectionable. Anyway, let's jump into this, shall we? UFC on ESPN Plus 123, the UFC's debut in Qatar. Knocking another country off the list. I'm sure they got a giant site fee from it, so good for them. How did the predictions go? Predictions actually went pretty well. What did I change my mind? Oh, okay. So the big thing that shifted was we lost the Gaziv versus Sergey Sergey Spivak fight. And on very short notice, in flew Salsa Boy, Waldo Cortez Acosta, who I really dislike as a fighter. But Waldo is better than the human blob. Um, so that was a fairly easy pick. And then, he made it work. So, yeah, that one I think everything else I just stuck with. Um, yeah, I mean, again, it didn't go perfectly, but I don't think I changed my mind on anything else. Anyway, so predictions overall went 11 and 3. Any of those I felt good about. Horiguchi, I can't believe he was a dog. Like that genuinely shocked me when I saw how much of a dog Horiguchi was on the betting line. Like, guys, I'm not saying that Ulanbekov is bad, but he cuts a lot of weight to get down to 125. Look at that man's frame. That's ridiculous. He's got good wrestling, but not much offense behind it, and he wears down over time. And Kyoji Horiguchi is a really good counter wrestler, gets stronger over time, has good power, and is insanely quick even by flyweight standards, even at his age. Like, how is this complicated? So I felt good about that one. Um, I almost went back and forth on the Oral by Hermanson fight, but because I had forgotten that Oral by is mostly a lightweight. Though his last couple of fights have been like at 160 and 165. Some of that was due to short notice opponent changes. So he kind of just said, yeah, but I not cut all the way to lightweight. Would that be okay? And everyone kind of just shrugged and went, sure. Um, but Hermanson cutting down at that weight class, at that age, just, yeah. That was really what kind of led me to that one. Um, Anything I should have got right that I didn't? Uh, Probably should have given Dalby more credit. The layoff for Izagak was, I think, very, very important there. Like I'll get to that when I get to it, but that's a long layoff. And I probably should have got Alex Taporia over Almacan. But, I can live with it. The rest of it, yeah, it just kind of was what it was. Most of that wasn't super hard to kind of parse out. Okay. Just for the record, what else I got wrong? Again, the Taporia one, because I picked Almacan. I was made aware of Denzel Freeman's wrestling credentials closer to the fight with him and Buwo. Would have changed my opinion on that one, but I kind of just let that one rock. Terrible fight too. And I mentioned Dalby and Izagak. Probably should have. Again, maybe I should have got that one right, but the rest of them, and at least one of them was an upset because Horiguchi was a dog. I think the rest of them I picked were favorites. I don't feel good about that. I mean, again, I picked a couple of other underdogs that didn't pan out. I think Horiguchi was the only dog that cashed last night, or yesterday morning rather, from where I am. One of those days, man. Anyway, so that 11-3 year to date brings me to 368, 121-2 with 3 no contests. Yeah, I'm okay with this. Again, I'm pretty confident that next year I want to really aim for 400. I don't know if I'll get it, but I do want to. I do want to like actually set the goal for myself next year. So that'll be what we're doing there. All right. As for the fights themselves, main event, a relevant fight in the lightweight division. Arman Tsarukyan pretty much ran over Dan Hooker. Ended him with an arm triangle choke, 3:34 of the second. Hooker did kind of what he does. Had some decent long-range attacks, especially front kicks. Man, if you're a good front kicker, you can make someone's life miserable. But there is a bit of a counter to it. Well, I shouldn't say a counter. There is no such thing as a perfect technique, right? There's always give and take. Straight line kicks will make a wrestler's life miserable if they're trying to attack you in straight lines. If they don't mind waiting to counter, kick comes in, you downward parry or circle parry or whatever your terminology happens to be. I think circle parry is the most common. My particular terminology is more that's a downward hooking parry, but it doesn't really matter. You drag that across your body and suddenly they're way out of position. Same thing with side kicks. That's how Alexander Gustafsson got John Jones down. Parry to side kick got John out of position, rode him down briefly. Not much to it, but he had more success wrestling him than Cormier did. And let's not confuse amateur wrestling credentials there. Cormier's amateur wrestling is significantly better on its own terms than Gustafsson's. But you kind of got that with Hooker a couple of times. Hooker's primary takedown defense against really fast guys is just go for the guillotine, which is a choice. He tried it in the first round, lost it. It was a really nice escape, actually, from Tsarukyan at one point. He wound up under briefly and, like, showed his back and baited Hooker into trying to choke him. Then got 2-on-1 and used that to, like, scramble up. Once they got into punching distance, Tsarukyan did decent work. He's got fairly fast hands, and he's not the biggest hitter at 155, but he's got respectable power. And yeah, second round, a little bit more of the same. He off-balanced Hooker pretty early, got on top, and just beat him up with elbows until he... Really nice pressure pass to get from full guard into half guard, and then same kind of thing, a little bit of a knee cut. But his pinning is really, I think, what sets him apart. Pinning is, like, believe it or not, the most... I shouldn't say the most. If you do a lot of just submission grappling overall, pinning is... It's not unimportant, but it's usually of secondary importance in general to positional understanding and being able to just kind of flow properly. Because if you can flow a lot, then who cares how much they move? If you're able to beat them to the next position over and over again, let them wear themselves out moving around, you're always going to be a step ahead, and you're always going to, be better off. That's kind of the theory anyway. Now, again, this is not universal. It is not to the exclusion of all else, but speaking very, very broadly, that's a real common kind of mindset, especially past a certain point. In MMA, in particular, pinning is significantly more important. It's not, as I said, like if you look at competition jiu-jitsu and whatnot, it's not unimportant to know how to pin. But it took like Gordon Ryan and a little bit of Craig Jones actually, kind of looking at what a lot of the Dagestani guys were doing in MMA with their grappling, tweaking it to apply it to sport jiu-jitsu, and from there understanding how to use pins in competition and bringing that again a little bit more into the forefront. It's still not like the most prevalent thing, but there's a few people who have kind of made it so that is a more integral part of high-level grappling than it used to be. And in MMA, it's even more important because if you pin someone, that lets you, land damage. And Arman Tsarukyan, one of the few guys actually willing to just, throw kind of nasty elbows from inside the guard. He's got some really solid ground and pound. Now, he didn't always. In fact, I think the first time I saw him use it appropriately was when he fought Joel Alvarez, which, got him a finish. But look what he did when he fought Charles Oliveira. Now, because it's Charles Oliveira, your ground and pound has to be a little bit more judicious than normal, but he definitely was able to use it against him. But a lot of the pinning, again, against Oliveira, just stopping him, slowing him down, not letting him get motion going, really neutralized a lot of his game. He also, that second round guillotine escape from Tsarukyan, do not try that at home. Like, because he gets caught in a guillotine and a takedown on the second round, and this time he winds up in guard. Like, the first time Hooker tries to guillotine him, he never gets the legs in play, not in a serious capacity, so the choke's not nearly as dangerous. Second round, he gets the legs in play, and Tsarukyan, because he starts with Hooker, he doesn't have full guard when he starts. He's kind of got like the half guard, but it's on the dangerous side of the choke, so you're safe if your main body is on the opposite side of the choking arm. Tsarukyan's wasn't. And turning into the choke that way is actually, again, quite dangerous because you can actually just tighten up the choke. And then the other leg kind of goes over the hip to stop them from clearing and moving to that side. So you don't need both legs in play for full guard. You got one over there, the other one kind of in more like either a half guard or a butterfly hook. Because if they pass to that other side, it's not, again, that's not safe to go that direction. That can tighten the choke up. And Tsarukyan's response was, okay, I'm going to do a gator. I can't even call it a gator roll because that's a specific wrestling move. It's an early-on roll. If you played Star Fox, it's a barrel roll. That's not actually a barrel roll. A barrel roll has a lot more motion to it. It's an early-on roll, technically, when you kind of just have your axis, what axis would that be? You have your forward axis in place, so call it the Z-axis, and then you just rotate around that. And if you've seen Gators do their death roll, like that's what he does. He's in this choke, and he just rolls in place, kind of. He actually rolls more into full guard, so there's some lower body motion. But very briefly, he then winds up in a dragon sleeper. Guys, I can't stress this enough. If that will break your neck. Then this isn't some, like, 1980s untested karate BS. Like, that's a legitimate way to seriously attack the cervical vertebrae. Normally you only get there from like north-south if you fail a north-south choke, depending on what they do, or if you got back mount and you, especially if someone's not good about their 2-on-1 and they just get your arm on the other side of the neck because they can't choke you from over there. If you get that back and you just snake it around in reverse, like, there's a lot of leverage there. And he just spins all the way through it. I guess it happens fast enough that Hooker doesn't realize the position he technically finds himself in. But once again, I can't stress this enough. If your neck is not super, super strong, even just rotating that way is a bad idea. Even if you don't get all the way into the terrible position. But he gets all the way through it because, of course he does. And then just, again, batters, passes, triangle choke attack. He does the arm triangle finish. You're seeing more in, like, competition, because sort of normally the thought is you finish the choke by getting out of mount into side control on the same side as the arm that you're using to choke. So the same side as their arm is that you have trapped, if that wasn't clear before. And that does technically provide a bit of leverage, especially if you start moving your hips, you turn, you want to get as perpendicular as you can. It really locks everything down. But when you move to that side, that's also the only chance they have to escape. Because if you're in a really, like, answering the phone is not the last line of defense for that. It is when you're, like, super, super desperate. But really what you have to do when they get close like that, you have to turn onto the shoulder that they're choking. So when they dismount to move to side control, you kind of, like, get a hand on their hips, especially the near hip, and you stop them from flattening out. So there's still a little space there, then you get onto your shoulder, and that will create space. A lot of the leverage is lost, so that's the moment when you have to kind of make your move. If you want to avoid all that, you don't actually get out of full mount. What you do is you move your hips to the mat, mostly one, and then you kind of leave your leg on top of their hips in the other to stop them from moving. And if you do lose it, it lets you maintain full mount. So that's the finish he used. He caught Benson Henderson with it too, I think, kind of that exact same version. Anyway, that's what you're seeing more and more. So good win for Tsarukyan. He wants his title shot next. I absolutely think he is the deserving number one contender for Ilia Topuria. I think he is probably the most credible threat to Topuria at 155. I don't know that I'd pick him, but he's one of the only guys in especially the lightweight division using ground and pound correctly. He can wrestle like a crazy man. We don't quite know his cardio over 5 rounds, but I don't need to know the answer to every little, twist and turn in the guy's game before I think he's potentially ready. And again, I think he is the most compelling challenger. So yeah, give him the belt, give him the title shot. Once again, I don't know that I'd pick him, but he made his case. Apart from some of the stupidity that he engaged in dude, you headbutted Dan Hooker at the weigh-ins or the face-offs. Like, if that had cut him or you and that main event is off at the last minute because you're an idiot, my man, how unreliable can you be? You pulled out of the last time. You were supposed to fight for the belt already. You had a back injury? Fine. I understand that injuries happen. But something about the way you conducted yourself around that, the UFC got pretty pissed. And now you just, again, behave like an idiot. ugh. I think he deserves the title shot. I really do. But you kind of got to be on. You can't let your guard down around that guy, and I don't mean like it's another fighter because he's crazy. I mean, you can't rely on him to not do something stupid. You need a contingency in place for everything he does as a promotional entity. So, yeah, there's that. But good win. Absolutely. Again, I think him and Topuria is one of the better. It's the fight to make it lightweight. It is the fight to make it lightweight. So for Dan Hooker, he's just kind of where he is at this point. He's going to have some entertaining fights. Bless him for that. But I think his, whatever we've seen his ceiling. As by the time we've gotten to where we are, we've seen his ceiling. Co-main event really should have been 5 rounds, especially the way it played out over 3. I kind of wanted the extra 2. Ian Machado Garry defeats Belal Muhammad via unanimous decision, 230-27s, 129-28. Probably wouldn't have been a draw. The 230-27s mean it wouldn't have. There were 2 times Garry poked Belal Muhammad in the eye. The second one I take issue with. First one, eye poke, pretty clearly on the replay. No issue. The second one, Gary's got both hands out kinda, but his left one's in a fist. His right one isn't. But his right one doesn't really make contact with the eye, and it's not the one Belal Muhammad complains about. Muhammad complains about his right eye, again, the same one that got poked earlier. And what made contact with his right eye, based on everything I saw on the replay, was a fist, not a finger. Should not have been a foul. Should not have been a timeout. At least, again, from everything I saw. I don't know. That looked legit, but eh. As for Garry, yeah, he looked pretty good. Good stance, good read on what Muhammad does. Muhammad's his defense is poor. It's been poor for a while. He kind of makes up for it with aggression. Is sort of the thought process there. But man, whenever he fights anyone who moves well, he really struggles. That was where he struggled against Leon Edwards. Was when Edwards was able to kind of get mobile again, because Belal Muhammad's head is always on the center line. Ian Garry feasted on that. His jab messed up Belal. Had a couple of decent 1-2s. When Belal was able to actually navigate the range, because Ian Garry is a very large welterweight, he could land some punches, because Garry does not have the best instincts about pulling versus slipping and rolling. Pulling is a perfectly valid defensive reaction. It's a defensive technique. But you got to have a good feel for it, because if you don't, you can get caught out of position. And a few different times, Belal caught him, again, leaning and pulling, and he wasn't able to respond quick enough, so he got tagged on the follow-up. But, yeah, look, if Belal Muhammad can't get you down, he really struggles to win fights. He doesn't need, a freaking Merab Dvalishvili level of takedown offense, but he desperately needs control. It's a key component of how he wins. I mean, Muhammad's got 2 finishes in his entire UFC career. Let me check that real fast. Might be 3 at this point. So once he gets to the UFC, yeah, he beats Augusto Montano with punches. He submits Takashi Sato, and then he TKOs Sean Brady. So he's got 3. 3 finishes in a UFC career that dates back to 2016. That's, and he's got, how many UFC fights? A lot. I don't want to count those up or look it up on the other website. So I he's just not a finishing threat. And so he needs a lot of control as a component of how he wins fights. And Garry just denied him all of that. So solid win for Garry. Here's the problem with Garry. He talks a lot of, he makes a lot of noise. And that's fine if you want to make a lot of noise for yourself. It's a choice. Then most of his fights look like this. He talks a lot. It's one thing to make a lot of noise, but if you make a lot of specific noise, like he just constantly did the, if Belal stands and trades with me, if he stands with me for any length of time, I'm going to knock him out. He was promising a first round thing, which was not going to happen. And another thing about Belal, like he's only been finished, what, twice in the UFC, if that? I think only the one time, right? Luque knocked him out. Yeah, that's the only. So in all, he's not got a lot of losses overall, and he's only been finished once. Like, no, you weren't. You said a lot of things to try and generate some hype that you knew weren't true, and we know they weren't true because the first thing you said afterwards was, "Yeah, he's a tough guy. I was ready for 3 rounds. I expected it. There's a reason he's only been finished once, and he's a former champion." Again, if you want to make a lot of noise, you kind of gotta keep the gimmick going. And again, Gary's got 3 UFC finishes as well. Now his career in the UFC is shorter, but yeah. So he debuts with a knockout win over Jordan Williams, who washed out. He TKO'd Song Kanan after nearly getting finished in the first round. And then he got Daniel Rodriguez in the first round. That was in 23. Now, some of this is, the guys he's been fighting since then. Neil Magny's not easy to finish. Jeff Neal's not easy to finish. MVP's not easy to finish. I don't think he won the MVP fight. He didn't get finished by Shavkat, which is to his credit. He, didn't finish Carlos Prates. Oh, no. And he didn't finish Belal Muhammad. Again, a guy who's been finished once. So some of this is, escalating level of competition means you get less finishes as a general rule. I get it. But he was never close to a finish. He had Venom Page's back for a long time, and his finishing mechanics were just really, really, really poor. Ditto Shavkat. He got his back at that, I forget which round it was. Might have been the 5th. Someone who actually knows what they're doing a little bit more from the back would have got that choke in. So he's, that's kind of the closest. He never came close to finishing Carlos Prates. He never came close to finishing Belal here. He's a good fighter. I certainly don't mean to imply otherwise, but he's not what he says he is, and very obviously not what he says he is. He called for the title fight. You are spoiled for choice at welterweight. Because you could go with him. You could go with Michael Morales. You could go with Carlos Prates. That's a bit of a reach. He's probably got the weakest case. You could go with Shavkat, who unfortunately has been out for long enough that, some of that momentum and interest has waned. But those are kind of the big contenders. And none of them are wrong. Which, of course, means the UFC is going to go with something stupid like Kamaru Usman. I can't express how much I don't want Islam Makhachev versus Kamaru Usman. You've still got, Jack Della Maddalena. Sean Brady may have had the loss, but he's still a top guy in the weight class. So there's a lot of permutations you can play through here with the top of welterweight. And just leave it to the UFC. I guarantee you they're going to pick the dumbest one. That's just where they are at this point with most of this stuff. Garry, I don't think has the best case for the next title shot, but he does have a good one. And the fact that most of his fights are a little on the uninteresting side, how is that unique to the landscape of MMA right now? So he is probably no more than one fight away from fighting for the belt, though. Like if he does have to take one more, what I want. I've seen him deal with enough grapplers at this point. I kind of wouldn't mind him and JDM. It's former champion. Or you do him and Kamaru Usman. And then after he beats Usman, that's another former champion. At that point, yeah, he's kind of undeniable. But, dude, you can play for a long time looking at how you might want to book out the top of welterweight right now. It is probably the best division in the sport at the moment. It is very, very stacked. It's got a lot of, not just talent, but a lot of, like, different kinds of talent. So, yeah, welterweight's in a great spot. Tough loss for Muhammad, but I struggle to feel really bad for that guy. I mean, he kind of overachieved getting to the belt at all, which is not a bad thing. Like, seriously, good on him. But I don't know. I hate to say he's like fully past it, but this was a non-trivial setback after losing the belt. Not insurmountable challenge, not, crippling, but at his age, it's going to take a serious effort if he wants another crack at the belt. And yeah, oh god. Also, Kamaru Usman having one win in like 4 years, and that being over Joaquin Buckley. Like, no. Ali Abdelaziz wants Islam to fight Usman because he reps both guys, so he gets a percentage of each of their purses, and that makes him happy. It's a bigger payday. Ugh. So, anyway, that was your co-main. Not a great fight, but, neither guy known for, great fights. Light heavyweight next, Volkan Oezdemir defeated Alonzo Menafield via knockout, 127 to the first. A lot of volume out of Oezdemir, a lot of combination work, man. The thing that started all this for Menafield was Oezdemir, like, shifts and throws a right, so now he's in southpaw. Then he shifts again, and as he's doing so, throws a left uppercut, followed by a left knee. And it's weird enough to take the same path with two consecutive strikes. There's usually variance, even if you throw in a nice straight 1-2. Your jab and your cross aren't actually coming down the same line. They're similar and they're both coming straight, but if you actually look at it, they're not coming straight they're not coming, again, on the same line. There's a little bit of difference. Again, even if you throw them as straight as you can, the end point's the same, but they come down slightly different paths to get to that point. Throwing something, again, it's not impossible to do. I think Jack Slack talked about this, and he had a couple of options. Like, you throw an uppercut followed by another uppercut. That's closer to coming on the same line. Or the one, when you're feeling silly and want to play around with this, throw a spinning back fist and then a head kick. Cain Velasquez showed that once or twice, which for a man his size was insane. I think it's Sean O'Malley shows like it's especially if you miss the back fist, you've got all that rotational momentum. So just you step through, throw the spinning back fist, and then keep that going. You plant on your leg and just let the other one come around and kick. So it's not unheard of. I think it's rarer to see same line, same side. Like that actually is super rare, but it worked here for Oezdemir. That hurts Menafield. Then he starts swinging at him along the fence. Menafield does an okay job for the first like 4 punches. Blocking, rolling, his back's to the cage, and he's a little bit rattled, but he's with it enough to like try and move. But Oezdemir just never gives him a chance to break away or throw back. And eventually the punches start getting through, not finishes him off. Mediocre light heavyweights. But you know what? Good. Oezdemir doing passable impression of a lighter weight guy who knows how to modulate his punches. Welterweight, Mektabek Oralbai knocked out Jack Hermansson, 246 of the first. I'm going to say this. Hermansson physically didn't look awful at welterweight, but you could see the durability wasn't there because the punch that Oralbai turned his lights off with was not an especially hard punch. It was glancing to. I mean, it hit him like on the temple and behind the ear, which is a really bad place to get hit. But it wasn't full on flush. It was kind of just like, again, glancing along that, and it just lights out to Hermansson. Changing weight classes is not going to... There are some problems it solves. There's other things it opens up, but there's a lot of problems it doesn't fix, and people tend to think that it does, and again, it doesn't. I don't know if Oralbai will stick around at welterweight, but I might like to see him against a normal welterweight, not a middleweight cutting down, to get a better feel for how he might perform in that weight class. At heavyweight, I mentioned this a little bit already, but Waldo Cortez Acosta knocks out Shamil Gaziev. Waldo lives on his chin a little bit too much for my liking. Now, he's got a great chin. I mean, he stood for 3 rounds with Sergey Pavlovich, and Pavlovich has, like the death touch. And he couldn't crack Cortez Acosta. Like, he may have bothered him once or twice, but he never, like, seriously hurt him. And Gaziev actually lands a nice little, like, left sort of shovel uppercut. It's not the best punch in the world, but Gaziev is not a light-handed guy. He's not Pavlovich or Ngannou or anyone with, like, again, super heavy hands, but if he catches you with the same punch he caught Waldo with, like, that usually gets a different reaction than he got out of Waldo here. And I think because Gaziev expected a different reaction, expected, like, to have actually rattled the guy, he gets a little out of position, trying like, oh, I hit him cleanly, which he did. Now's my time to shine, and I'm going to flurry here. And Cortez Acosta was like, oh, you hit me. Okay. Let me avoid the immediate follow-up and then crush you with a right hand. Gaziev goes down. He lets Gaziev back up, but Gaziev is like doing nothing at that point. So Cortez Acosta is like, okay, here's a jab. Here's another jab. Here's a third jab. And you haven't reacted to any of this, so right hand. And down you go. Look, Waldo Cortez Acosta, most of his fights suck. A lot of people after this doing he's good about hitting guys out of position. He's okay. And you know what? He just knocked out 2 guys in a row. The way that Ante Delia fight was handled was pretty poor from an officiating standpoint. And, I'm excited about his future. I respectfully disagree because I remember all of his fights in the UFC. And respectfully, most of them suck. Like if you have goldfish memory about Waldo Cortez Acosta's fights and you just remember the last 2, sure, I'll give you that. But I remember I remember his fight with Andrei Arlovsky. I really do. I remember his fight with Sergey Spivak. It sucked. I remember. God, that fight with Robelis de Spain. Oh, that was awful. Oh, God, that was terrible. His first two fights in the UFC were not good. Jared Vanderaa and Chase Sherman. Okay, Chase Sherman was basically a punching bag by the end of that fight, but no. So many of this guy's fights just kind of suck. And look, he's had a busy 2025. You know what? Let me give the man his props here. He's fought 5 times this year. He's gone 4-1. And 3 of those have been finishes. He knocked out Ryan Spann. Then, the Delia fight, which was weird, and this one, okay. But, oh God, that Sergey Spivak fight was awful too. Ugh. I legitimately tried to block that one from my memory. That fight sucked so much. But going through his thing, you're like, oh yeah, he beat Sergey Spivak. Man, oh golly, that fight was awful. He wants to fight in December. That seems like a bit of a stretch. Because he wants to get a 6th fight this year. Look, if they can find someone to fight him and they can shoehorn him into the Apex card, knock yourselves out. I'll be pissed because I have to watch another Waldo Cortez Acosta fight. And again, those tend to suck. Even his Bellator fight, I can't hold that too much against him because, it was his 4th professional fight. And it's unreasonable to be have super high expectations of guys on their 4th professional fight, but was he on the post limbs for 271 for Bellator 271? No, they weren't doing post limbs at that point. He was the 2nd fight on that card though. Terrible. Anyway, he wants to look. Here's the other thing though, and much as I don't like watching him fight, he's 4-1 this year. And the last 2 have been knockouts, and you know what? You kind of do have to reward that, and heavyweight sucks. If he wins the belt, they should just retire the division, because they can't recruit talent. But, that's a topic for another day. Or at least later on in the show, because there's something to be said about that in a minute or two. Anyway. And kicking off the main card, glad they got him on the main card, Kyoji Horiguchi defeats Tiger Ulanbekov with a technical submission, rear naked choke, 2:18 of the 3rd. Decently close first round. Ulanbekov is able to clinch up a little bit more, but Horiguchi just starts punishing him to the body early, and with a guy with the frame that Ulanbekov has and how much weight he has to cut to make 125, that's a good idea. Horiguchi landed some nasty calf kicks that just really made Ulanbekov's life miserable over the course of this fight. Second round, so first round I gave it to Horiguchi. I didn't think it was super close, but that was a competitive round. Round 2 is less competitive. Horiguchi kind of beats the crap out of him. Third round, he's forced Ulanbekov to go southpaw because his left leg is so damaged. From those calf kicks. He's still throwing the right leg, but now he's throwing it a little bit to the body, and Ulanbekov's starting to react poorly to that, so one of those winds up going to the head, drops him, punches on the ground. I'll give Ulanbekov credit for having a chin, man, because again, he got kicked in the face. Lands a few more punches on the ground, gets the rear naked choke, puts him to sleep. Says he wants to fight Pantoja, despite the fact that they both train out of American Top Team. Yeah, dude, Horiguchi's awesome and has been for a really long time. I mean, he left the UFC 9 years ago on a 3-fight winning streak. He left because he felt severely insulted and disrespected by the UFC. He had a point. His title shot against Demetrius Johnson came way too early, all things considered. I mean, just look, they were running out of challengers at the moment. Story of DJ's career. But he was only, what, 4-0 in the UFC at that point? He didn't beat anyone of note. Like, he beat Dustin Page, Daryl Montague, John De Los Reyes, and Luis Gaudino. Like, he was not beating top-tier flyweights at the time. Loses at the literal last second to Demetrius Johnson. He'd lost that fight comprehensively until that point. Because of that loss, he goes to American Top Team. His wrestling and his wall walking and whatnot gets light years better. Then he wins 3 in a row. He beats Chico Camus, decent bounce back fight. Beats Neil Seery, and then his last fight in the UFC, he beats Ali Bagutinov, which is a fairly impressive thing to do. But if you look at those last 3 fights, so Demetrius Johnson, that fight, he and DJ like main event 186. Then the next fight, he's on the main card, but he's kind of featured there. Okay, so decently respected there. The Neil Seery fight, he's on the prelims. He's on the Fight Pass prelims of that card, back when those were a thing. I mean, you put him behind... Here's the fights listed above that one, by the way. Reza Madadi fought above that. Josh Emmett fought above that. Not a big deal at that point in time. Yeah, there's a few different... Okay, he may not have made the main card. That's actually a decent card. Alistair Overeem and Andrei Arlovsky was your main event. Stefan Struve and Bigfoot Silva. Gunnar Nelson and Albert Tumanov. Could have put him there over Jermaine Durandamy. Certainly over Nikita Krylov and Francimar Barroso. So there, he certainly could have gone on the Fox Sports 1 prelims over any of those, except maybe Rustam Khabilov, who at that point was kind of on his way up, if memory serves. But then his last fight, the Bagutinov fight, yeah, he's not on the main card. Again, I mean, the whole thing's on Fight Pass, so you could argue the value there, but he's like buried in the middle of the prelims. He's fighting below Artem Lobov versus Taruto Ishihara. He's fighting below Jack Marshman and Magnus Sedenblad. Like, yeah, man, I get you feeling deeply disrespected. Unfortunately, like, the best part of his career, I think, came after that. Like 18 to 20 is probably the very best version of him. Maybe 17 in there too. Yeah, definitely throw some 17 wins in there. He choked out Manel Kopp, guillotined Darian Caldwell, beat Darian Caldwell again, lost to Kai Asakura, took a year and change off. Part of that was the pandemic hit. Not all of that was the pandemic hitting, but part of it. Then he beats Kai Asakura very decisively in their rematch. Then he winds up fighting at bantamweight. He was beating Kyoji Horiguchi before that kind of miracle spinning back fist. Then Patchy Mix dominates him. Still don't know what happened to Patchy Mix. Then he hasn't lost since. He's still really good. You could give him a title shot. And no one's going to complain that loudly, because this was a really solid win for Horiguchi. I think if you just look like technically the best fighter that Japan's produced, maybe not the most important to the Japanese MMA scene, that's probably some combination of Sakuraba and Kid Yamamoto. I mean, Sakuraba, dude. Sakuraba's importance is really, really high. But again, if you want to talk like technically, for a while you could argue that Yushin Okami was the best guy Japan had produced, because he actually was a technically better fighter than Sakuraba, and Horiguchi is better than him. Horiguchi's awesome. So very glad he's back in the UFC. Let him and Pantoja fight, man. I think I might favor him over Pantoja, which I don't say lightly at flyweight. But yeah. Go for it. Again, it's flyweight. The UFC doesn't really care about it. And Pantoja's beaten a lot of the top guys. That said, if Josh Fan wins, might change the equation a little bit, especially depending on like how he might win. So, we'll see. Prelim time, Luke Riley knocked out Bogdan Grad 30 seconds into the second round. Good first round from Grad because Riley's wrestling is pretty bad. But he doesn't get deterred. So even though he's in bad spots and loses the round comprehensively, he kind of dogs his way through it and then is willing to start throwing in the second, cracks Grad with a left hook, and that's kind of all she wrote. So Nicholas Dalby defeated Saigid Izagakhmaev, split decision. I agreed with Dalby winning. Izagakhmaev just looked rusty. I mean, the man last fought when he beat Shinya Aoki in one championship in, was that 22? Let me double check. Because I want to be sure about what year that was. Yeah, it was November of 22. So the man's been off. Good grief! It was a couple of days over 3 years. Dude, one championship just put their entire MMA group on ice for, again, years. Freaking criminal, man. Dalby's always kind of a rough welcome and is not easy to beat. But man, yeah, he looked rusty. Like I genuinely kind of like want to see his next fight as a better gauge of what he might have to offer at this point. Dalby, you know what? Just doing the old man thing at this point. God bless him. You know what you're getting into with him for the most part. And you could score this for Izagakhmaev. I kind of thought they might because Qatar, but they didn't. And I agreed with Dalby winning. Flyweights, Asu Almabayev chokes out Alex Perez with a guillotine choke, 22 seconds of the third round. Good little back and forth fight through a couple of rounds. Almabayev really needs to is a wrestling heavy fighter, and he really needs that working in his favor, or his striking doesn't quite work as well. So I had him 1 round apiece because Perez had a pretty good first round. Then third round, Perez with a little bit of a sloppy shot. Almabayev sprawls. Then as they're getting up, he's got the front headlock. He jumps guard for standing guard, not guard on the ground, but he jumps standing guard with the guillotine. He's able to force the tap. Good finish from him. He probably needed it. Yeah, he's a pretty solid flyweight roster member. Light heavyweight, our debut, that kind of mattered. Abdul Rahman Yakhayev defeated Rafael Cerqueira via rear naked choke, 33 seconds of the first round. He came out through a bit of a wheel kick that kind of didn't land, and then followed with a punch that sort of missed, and then landed a head kick that, again, mostly landed. This is crappy light heavyweights, so he made an impression. Cerqueira shouldn't be in the UFC. Yakhayev, they were calling this the fastest submission in UFC light heavyweight history, which is only sort of true. I hate trying to parse this out. It's not entirely untrue. The problem is, if that's the way you want to play this, you're deliberately erasing a chunk of this weight class's history. Because there was a time when when the weight limit was a little bit different. Like, you really have to go back to like Frank Shamrock to get this, which is part of why the UFC tries to ignore it. But like Frank Shamrock armbarred an Olympic gold medalist in wrestling in like 6 seconds. It's one of the fastest submissions in UFC history overall. And it was in the weight class that would become light heavyweight, but at the time the weight class was a little bit different. And so because they had a slightly different category of weight, the UFC in particular likes to pretend that this period of time, especially when Zuffa wasn't owning it, we pretend that that's not real. This is not really the fastest submission in light heavyweight history. Again, it's a little bit complicated, so it's definitely the fastest submission in the modern light heavyweight era. It's certainly the last like 5 to 10 years. So there's ways you can phrase that without lying about it, is more the point. But again, this is just kind of where we are. Oh shoot, I forgot to mention it with Garry. Had a really nice oblique kick. John Gooden kept calling it a sachet. It's not a sachet kick. Jack Slack mentioned it. If you do the Savat thing, that's not a sachet, that's a sachet bas. Because a sachet is just kind of a side kick. You can sort of tell the difference because they usually do it off the back leg, but there's a way that this is a really weird noodly thing. But if you watch people throw a back leg side kick who have like karate background versus wushu sanda background versus savat background, you can actually tell which is which if you've seen all three of them done. Like Max Holloway, when he was throwing that against Yair Rodriguez, he threw a lot of these. He was doing it more Savat style. Zhang Wei Li, when she was throwing a lot of these, does it more Sanda. And who's got a good karate one in the UFC? Because Wonderboy doesn't throw back leg side kicks. I can't remember off the top of my head, but if you've seen people do it, you can actually see the difference. It's a little bit weird, but even if you couldn't articulate all the differences, if you watch them do it next to each other, you could see three distinct styles. Anyway. But yeah, dude, Garry's oblique, that's why I call it an oblique kick, because it's easier than me badly pronouncing French. But his oblique kick was nasty. Like, that man put some oomph onto it. Normally guys don't. That's a difficult kick to throw really, really hard because the range has to be just right, and it's a little bit awkward. Like, you don't engage all the same muscle groups. You kind of have to try and do it with body weight if you really commit to it. And then you wind up all out of position, and again, your knee and hip might be really unhappy with you depending on how you might have to step. But Garry was just trying to like kick his knee backwards. And you know what? God bless you, man. If you're gonna throw, too many people throw that kick as like just a nothing kick. Like, if you're gonna throw it, I appreciate throwing it. Like, John Jones had kind of the perfect medium of force to like management of the awkwardness. Garry just throwing it like he's throwing anything else, just like trying to blast through it. And yeah, like I said, man, bless him. That's a mean kick if you know what you're doing with it. That is a mean kick. He might have messed up Belal's knee with the way a couple of those landed. Anyway, don't know why I got on that thinking about that light heavyweight fight, but bantamweight's next. Alexander Topuria defeated Bekzat Almakhan via unanimous decision. 230-27 and a 29-28. Almakhan, a little bit weird. Does some weird stuff. I actually thought Almakhan won the first round, but he just kind of started getting corralled more and more as the fight went on by Topuria, and Topuria, pretty good wrestling and decent power. Rattled Almakhan in the third round, so decent stuff from him. Middleweight, Ismail Narudiev knocked out Ryan Loder in 126 of the first. Ryan Loder's not very good. Lightweight, Nurulio Aliyev defeated Shamrock. Shakme, is it Shakme or Shaquimi? I think it's Shakme. Yeah, solid win for Aliyev. Rock's just wrestling was not up to snuff. Which, considering he trains out of the same gym as Riley and Patty Pimblett and everyone, that tracks. None of their defensive wrestling is all that good. Patty gets away with having some decent counters and having really good overall mat grappling, but his wrestling leaves a little bit to be desired still. And kicking everything off, Denzel Freeman defeated Marek Buwol via unanimous decision, 2 29-28 into 30-27. This was basically a crappy sparring match. So, full report in the MMA Zone of 411mania.com, per usual. Bonuses. There was no fight of the night. Probably fair. Performances went to Tsarukyan, Cortez Acosta, Horiguchi, and Luke Riley. You did Yakayev dirty there. I'm just going to throw that out there. That guy deserved a bonus. Probably over Riley, for being honest. But there we are. So, as I mentioned, full report, MMAZone411mania.com. Go give it a read if you're so inclined. I always appreciate that. Okay, let's move on then, because we don't have to preview anything. Let me throw a quick little bit of boxing at you guys, if you don't mind, because same day as this, just a few hours later, we had the Ring 4 card, which had 3 fights near the top that I was actually kind of interested in. So very briefly, David Benavidez, the Mexican monster, got his first stoppage at light heavyweight, which is 175 in boxing speak. He beat Anthony Yard, beat him up the whole way. Benavidez didn't retain at 160, so it's super middleweight. He was a destroyer, but Canelo ducked him, and he didn't want to wait around for that, so he wound up bumping up because he wanted to fight for belts and get more money, and Canelo was ducking David Benavidez. I don't have a better way to phrase that. He just flagrantly refused to fight the man. And now wants a rematch with Bud Crawford, and just, God, no. Just no. Canelo, go away at this point. Just go away. You were the biggest thing in boxing for a while. You're an important figure, especially in the most recent era. You have spent the last 3 to 5 years being more of a pain in the butt than you are worth at this point. Go away. So Benavidez got a pretty good win here, got a belt, and then immediately said he wants to move up to cruiserweight, which is about 180. I think it's 185, 189. I can't remember exactly. Forgive me. And he wants to fight Zurdo Ramirez. Ramirez has only lost once in his career, and that was against Dmitry Bivol. You know what? Bless Benavidez for wanting all of that smoke. I don't think cruiserweight is a good spot for him right now, unless he really commits to changing his body. He doesn't have the same look. He's never been a one-punch guy, but it takes him a while to really wear guys down at light heavyweight. Bumping up to cruiserweight. He does potentially have the frame for it, but I worry that a chunk of his game wouldn't translate there because it wouldn't have the same effect. But, dude, that's a great fight. Ramirez, because he couldn't beat Bivol, people kind of forgot about him, especially because, give or take, those divisions are largely ruled at this point by, Bivol and Beterbiev. Well, they also fight at light heavyweight. So that might have been that was a light heavyweight, and then Zurdo moved up. Anyway. Doesn't matter all that much, but that's a heck of a fight, and bless him for wanting the smoke. Also on that card, Devin Haney got his first serious win in his new weight class. So okay, he looked okay. I don't know. the bloom is decidedly off the Devin Haney rose as far as I'm concerned. He fought very, very well in this fight, needs to be said. But I don't know. I struggle to care about anything he does. And finally at 115, Jesse Bam Rodriguez remains very, very awesome. Knocked out Puma. I don't want to say Martinez. I forget his last name. Forgive me. Knocked him out cold with a left hand. Beat him that entire fight. I know he'd have to cut back down a little bit, but dude, Naoya Inoue versus Bam Rodriguez is one of the best fights boxing could make right now. Again, I know right now Inoue's up a couple of weight classes from that. I think he's at 125. So he'd have to cut down a little bit, but Inoue's also like hit the top of where he can go. He couldn't go a weight class higher than he is now. So I don't know if they might want to like organize meeting kind of, because I think there's a weight class still between the two at the moment. Maybe they want to organize meeting there. I don't know. But, dude, Bam Rodriguez and the Monster is... Please make that fight boxing. Please make that fight. That would be so great. So, yeah, boxing had a decent event. And you know what? That's fine. That's cool. I am happy when boxing is doing well. Because I enjoy boxing. It's not my... I like MMA more if you make me choose, but, dude, good boxing is a art form unto itself that MMA cannot equal at this point in time. On its own terms, at least. Okay, let's move on to a few other things here. So the UFC 2026 calendar is still a giant mystery. We know that Dana White's complaining about the budget for the White House card. You can more than afford it. Shut up. They're talking about, a few more details are emerging about that. Like, it's not going to be a big event in terms of who's going to, like, they're not going to pack that place with like 10,000 people. It's going to be a smaller event. They said something like, 4K maybe. So we're not looking at like, an Apex style crowd. We're probably looking bigger than, I remember when they used to run places like the Hard Rock Casino. So we're looking a little bit bigger than that, but it's going to be a smaller crowd size. Which, okay, I mean, the amount of MMA fans who couldn't pass a security clearance check to get into the White House grounds is probably quite high. But apart from that, like, they finally announced one thing. They announced the first numbered event. It's not a pay-per-view anymore, but the first numbered event for the Paramount deal will be UFC 324 on January 24th. It'll be at the T-Mobile Arena, and they have announced one fight. A piece of crap light heavyweight fight between Modestas Bukauskas and Nikita Krylov. Obviously, they're going to announce more fights before the event, but they are rapidly running out of time for some of this. Now, I get that there might be broadcast restrictions for some of this stuff. Like, if you're broadcasting the UFC, even at the close of their deal, you don't want a giant chunk of what they're airing being, hey, in 3 weeks, leave this service, go to this other service, that's where we're going. You don't want that. But there's still you still could be announcing some stuff here, people. Anyway, there's also started to be some reporting coming out about what might be in the future. Because again, the UFC has announced nothing for 2026. I imagine by the time we get to 323, they will start announcing more stuff. I mean, they have to at that point. Like, you're not going to announce anything on the December 13th card. That's a crappy Apex card. You're not going to make major announcements on it or around it. No one cares. December 6th, you should have enough like general media footprint between Dwalshvili 2 to get something. But you got to start listing that out, guys. But there started to be some reporting coming out of Vegas. There are reporters based in Vegas. We've talked with a lot of guys in Vegas. That, the UFC is not operating the same way they used to. Not too surprising, especially given some of the personnel turnover. It looks like they might be looking at less U.S.-based events, certainly less Vegas-based events. You want to know why? Because in Vegas you have to compete for attention and for dollars. Fights in Vegas are not a novelty. Um, you have to bring something that will actually, again, generate attention. And right now, the UFC is struggling to do that, in no small part because they have not been able to generate American fighters successfully at the top level. I talked about this a few weeks back. Look, I don't need like American dominance in MMA. Frankly, I don't think the UFC needs or wants American dominance in MMA. But a presence of American-based MMA fighters at the highest level does seem like a thing you'd want when you run a lot of events in the United States. Now, in other places, so a lot of the kind of speculation is that they're shifting away from doing a lot of Vegas-based stuff because they don't have a lot of people who generate interest. So you'll still see them run Vegas events, don't misunderstand me. But you might see less Vegas events than you used to see, excluding the Apex slop. And I am not counting that. But more and more these days, the UFC is doing a lot of what they've been doing up to this point, which is, hey, country, give us money to bring the circus to town, and we will shill for you on the broadcast. And various countries going, boy, that sounds great. Sure, come on in here. Just, we'll ignore all the various issues our government has. And the, sanctions we may or may not be under, and the human rights violations, and all that good stuff. Here's a boatload of money. Bring the circus to town. And the UFC is like offsetting their sort of lack of ticket sales and lack of like consumer buzz, especially in the United States, with governments or state site fees, because if they take the UFC event to a state, they're getting paid to be there more often than not. If they go to Tennessee, whatever the relevant, Chamber of Commerce thing in the state of Tennessee is giving them money to be there. So they're kind of, and when you do that, if you're the UFC, then the goal is to go someplace you haven't been in a while and let the novelty of the circus coming to town, and you bring an okay card, and you see what happens. But they don't usually, anyway. So it looks like that's going to be a little bit more in the future if some of this reporting's accurate, so we'll keep an eye on it. But until we know, like, what the schedule is going to look like for 2026, we can only speculate based on the reporting that is out there right now. So there's that. Okay, a few other quick things to go through here. I will try to do this relatively quickly because I didn't really expect to still be going. But again, I found a few things that I think are worth at least a degree of attention. So the month of November is closed for the UFC, and maybe just a little bit of a coincidence. Jason Herzog did not ref a single fight for the UFC in the month of November. He had reffed at least one fight. I think the lowest he reffed was 3 fights in a given month for the UFC every other month this year. Now, this may be a coincidence. He may have wanted time off. Who knows? But this dovetailing with some reporting that the FBI was starting to look at Herzog because he was the ref for the weird Bulgarian and Del Valle fight. Look, it might have just been something operating out of an abundance of caution. It genuinely might have been a coincidence. It might be that just because he was the ref, they looked at him, and they may have found nothing. In fact, I think he's scheduled to ref stuff at UFC 320, the upcoming one, 323, right? So, might have been nothing. Might have been, again, purely a coincidence. Could very well have been that they temporarily didn't assign him anything major, while the people who know how to properly examine and collate data around weirdness in the fight game, or in sports betting in particular, had a look at him. And now they're like, okay, it looks okay, so sure, in December he can work again. Could be. But I do find it, at a minimum, odd that end of December, or excuse me, end of October, he's involved in that Bulgarian thing, even if just as the ref doing his job. He's still part of that. And now, then he spent a month not reffing any UFC fights. Does seem a little bit odd. Again, maybe nothing. Not trying to impugn the man's honor or imply anything. I am literally saying he's the guy who got singled out by some of the reporting, and he spent a month not reffing. I don't think, certainly not at the UFC level. So he is scheduled to be back, so unless something changes between now and then, could be much ado about nothing. But that investigation, when that thing starts hitting, and it's probably going to start hitting next year at some point, especially if a lot of the stuff related to the Bulgarian situation, is relevant to and ties directly into the Derek Minner stuff, then they already had several years. I mean, there was apparently an investigation into weird sports betting in the UFC prior to the Derek Minner thing. Like the year before it started, or earlier that year it began, and then the Minner thing kind of brought some of that to a head. So if that's all still like wrapping together and they didn't get anything new out of the Bulgarian situation, then about the 5-year mark, so that was 21. Yeah, usually the 5-year mark is kind of a big one for especially like RICO related stuff, which I don't know if they're using RICO in this case, but that usually kind of comes up with betting scandals. So but that's kind of one of the major breakpoints. Like if it goes longer than that, there's either nothing, and they're just kind of stalling and running out the clock before they have to like close it, or they hit something really big along the way and need a little extra time. So next year, next 18 months, give or take, will kind of tell the tale about that, and if anything comes down. So yeah, as usual, we'll keep an eye on everything for you as much as we can over here. Okay. We did get some confirmation in the boxing world. Jake Paul versus Anthony Joshua has kind of been confirmed by Netflix and everyone. If that goes more than 3 rounds, it should be investigated. Jake Paul about to live out my dream of getting knocked out for north of $50 million. Joshua's going to do something bad to him. Like, the size difference is real. The skill difference is real. Like, I don't know why. Okay, let me phrase it this way. I imagine that because this is going to be on Netflix, that when Jake Paul had to make good on whatever agreement he had with them after the Tank thing, that's Gervonta Tank Davis, not something related to Jake Paul in a tank. And I have to make that clarification because Jake Paul doing something stupid in an armored vehicle is not outside the realm of possibility. But if he had to make good on that, there's a decent chance the people at Netflix had a little bit of say in this. Or at a minimum, like, maybe they didn't give him a list of opponents, but said it needs to be at least this interesting. And Joshua's willing to take the payday to knock out a guy far below him in skill level, and frankly, a couple of weight classes below him at least one weight class below him in an ideal world. All right. So we'll see how that plays out if it even goes all the way through. On that same card, by the way, we had a fight fall apart. We were going to get Anderson Silva versus Chris Weidman in a boxing match on that. I think it was the co-main. Weidman pulled out, I believe injury related. For crying out loud, please, Chris Weidman, stop. Train to stay healthy if you want to stay healthy. But your competitive career is done. It's been done for a while. Please, make peace with it. Replacing Chris Weidman is, of all people, Tyron Woodley. So Tyron Woodley and Anderson Silva are going to have a boxing match. I hate this less. Ironically, I hate this less than Chris Weidman and Anderson Silva 3, but only marginally so. Just, ugh. All right, and I think the last thing I want to touch on very briefly here is some of our fears being realized. UFC middleweight champion Khamzat Chimaev indicated he's going to be out until April. He's got a foot injury that he needs to get surgery on. And between the recovery time period and Ramadan, April is kind of the first time he could be back. Okay. Look, let's all not pretend here. We all knew this dude was going to be, I fight once a year. If we're lucky. And that's kind of what it's looking like. So, dude, he got into it with Ian Garry at after the fights in Qatar, because he was there cornering Tsarukyan. Dude, you just became middleweight champion. Stop beefing with welterweights. That serves no one. If we're talking just about interest, frankly, Khamzat at welterweight against Islam Makhachev is a moderately interesting fight. There's so much work. I don't want it. I'll be very clear about this. There are so many great welterweight contenders. I don't need the middleweight champion to come down and screw everything up. And I definitely don't need Islam Makhachev to try to go up to 185. That seems a bridge too far, at least one bridge too far. But, again, I hate to say it because I don't even want to put it out there, but at 170, Khamzat and Islam does have a little bit of, on paper, stylistic intrigue to me. I'm just going to phrase it like that. Now, please, UFC, do not make that fight. Would be a travesty to both weight classes. Utterly unnecessary. Don't do it. But, yeah, Chimaev's out until April. Okay. We'll see if even that holds up. And that is what I've got. So let me check the social medias. If there's nothing new, we will do plugs and get out of here. Okay. Nope, I don't see anything new there, so plugs. Monday. On Damn You Hollywood, we will be reviewing Wicked Part 2 / Wicked for Good / whatever else stupid thing they want to call it. Yeah, not really looking forward to that one, but we'll see. That will be, again, on Damn You Hollywood. That will be me, Mark, and I think Alexis is supposed to join us. Last week, Mark and I reviewed Edgar Wright's Running Man, which was a catastrophic disappointment on every level. I had such high hopes for that movie. I really did. Really, really did. Ugh. What a disappointment. Listen to our review of that if you want more details. Happy to give them there. You don't need to listen to me rehash it here. Friday, WWE SmackDown, pre-taped, so yay. Saturday, no UFC event. I will be covering WWE Survivor Series, which is something of a tradition for me at this point. I don't know why no one else is willing to do it. But I've covered the last, it's my third in a row. I want to say it's 3 in a row. Because I did the one where CM Punk came back. Then he was part of the War Games the year after that. And that was just last year, because he was teamed with Roman when they did their old Bloodline versus Bloodline B team shtick. And then the interesting components of that group, namely Jacob Fatu and Bronson Reed, left. Ugh, that's a whole other thing. Not getting into it. You don't care. But I will be covering Survivor Series again, so if you're interested, WrestlingZone411Mania.com. Stop on by, say hello. Always appreciate it. Sorry about that. Oh man, couldn't quite hit the pause button fast enough. My apologies. All right. Next week we will be back here. We will preview the last pay-per-view, probably for a while at least, till Dana throws enough of a hissy fit, or they get a big enough fight. Either or. UFC 323, Marab, Dvalishvili versus Pyotr Yan 2. Probably goes exactly the same way their first fight did. Also, Pantoja and Josh Van. That's a really fun little fight. And, oh, they had another fight on there that was pretty good. I lied. No, wait, sorry, misread that. No, I didn't. Brandon Moreno and Tatsuro Tai was pretty good. Cejudo and Talbot is pretty crappy. Blachowicz and Guskov is crappy light heavyweights. How long has it been since Blachowicz fought? Didn't he suffer an injury? Respect to the man. He's north of 40. And he's 42. Oh, no, he fought in March. Yeah, okay. After the Pereira fight, he had a long layoff before the Ulberg fight. That was the layoff. Yeah, so I don't know. I just don't care. What else is there? Grant Dawson and Manuel Torres. That might not suck. Terrence McKinney and Chris Duncan. It's a Terrence McKinney fight. It's not getting out of the first round one way or the other. Barber and Silva, I don't care about. Sadikov and Ziam is a good fight. That actually deserves much higher placement than Scott. Nazim Sadikov and Fares Ziam is probably going to be real good. What else? Marvin Vittori and Bruno Ferreira. Meh. Edson Barboza and Jalen Turner. I think Turner coming back from a retirement. Barboza's over the hill. Ibo Aslan is back. Crappy light heavyweights. He's fighting Iwo. Where is this? Poland. Of course he's from Poland, which means I don't actually know how to pronounce this. I'm gonna guess it's Iwo Baranveski? Baranveski? I'm going with Baranveski until I hear otherwise, so I apologize. I am almost certainly butchering that. Mansour Abdul Malik and Antonio Trocoli. Trocoli shouldn't be in the UFC. Abdul Malik will probably crush him. And Muhammad Naima versus Myron Santos. That's not awful. Santos is actually decent, and so's Naimov. I mean, Santos won that season of Tough and then actually had a much better fight his next time out. Naimov has only lost once in the UFC to Felipe Lima. Yeah, that's actually not a terrible fight. Okay, there's some stuff there. There's some crap. But we'll give you a full preview next week, so come on back for that. Until then, that's going to wrap me up for the week. So thank you very, very much for tuning in. I appreciate the heck out of you. Stay safe out there. Enjoy the end of the year, however you choose to celebrate that at this particular point, because I know if you're Canadian, you already had Thanksgiving. If you're in the United States, it's this week. So enjoy that. And you know what? I've seen some people starting to make the move that we need to change the center meat of Thanksgiving from turkey, which needs so much help when you cook it, to brisket, which costs more and takes longer to cook, but is so much better tasting. I don't know. We'll see. I currently am planning still turkey this year, so I do the cooking for what we do around here because I have the time and the inclination to smoke it properly. So we'll be doing turkey, but I might make a push for brisket next year. See if I can get that to work. We'll see. All right, that's it for me for this week, everybody. Once again, thank you. Stay safe out there and continue to be well, be safe, and behave.